Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chakras and Cusswords podcast. And I am your host, Catherine. So, welcome back. And today I have a very interesting topic that I know so many of you guys have questions about because I've definitely been hearing a lot from people asking me about it, and also seeing it really starting to get more notoriety on social media and on multiple platforms. So today we are talking about the Akashic Records and what they are. How can we use them in our everyday lives? And we have a spiritual guest, coach, and healer, Miss Madi Lee. Welcome. How are you? And please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, I am doing well, and I am a coach and healer. I work with the Akashic Records and I do energy work within the Akashic Records to help women clear and heal blocks that allow them to reach their goals, whether that is to attract more money, freedom, confidence, whatever it is into their life, and really step into and embody that next level version of themselves that they want to become.
Perfect. So, okay, so I tend to ask people this because I feel that most people who are healers, who are on this spiritual journey where they're bringing more enlightenment and really sending the message to the earth, to the collective. How did you kind of get into this? Like, how did it all start? Because I know, like, the Akashic Records isn't something that is kind of discussed at the family dinner. Like, so how did this all start?
Definitely not discussed, especially in my family. So when I was in college about 10 years ago now, I actually received an Akashic record reading. It was with one of my friends of a friend who was doing it at the time. And I had never really done anything spiritual in my life. So I grew up very Catholic, and this was like a huge stepping stone. The very first thing I did, I just went into it open-minded. I had no clue what to expect or what it was. And it was a really profound moment for me. They gave me so much in-depth information and clarity, and it was things that I still resonate with today when I look back on my reading. And, for a while, I just kind of started tiptoeing more into spirituality. And for a long time, it was really something that was just very private for me. I didn't really talk about it with my friends or with my family. And I didn't share it because it was something that I personally did. And I was kind of concerned about how I would be judged or perceived or looked at when people knew that I was fairly spiritual. So for me, I did the whole corporate thing. I had my moments of, this is definitely not the life for me. This isn't what I want. And I became an entrepreneur. So this is actually my third business. And it is definitely the one I feel like is what I'm meant to be doing. I feel like I finally found my purpose and have so much more clarity and fulfillment from this. But it took me a long time and a lot on my own self-healing journey, which is really where it all kind of started a few years ago. That's where my spiritual practices just got much more in depth. I was doing a lot of shadow work, a lot of trauma work, and just personal development. And I went through another spiritual awakening, which really heightened a lot of my senses and intuition. And I got to a place where I knew that I was supposed to be starting a spiritual based business, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I was just going through this phase of like modality after modality. I was learning all about the chakras, and then I was reading auras, and then I was like into astrology and learning about how I can, read birth charts. And when I found the Akashic Records, I opened them for the first time on my own. I was like learning all about what they were because I had remembered that very first reading I did. And I'm like, I really don't know what these are. I should look into that some more. So I did. And honestly, when I opened them, it was like floodgates. So much information came in. I sat there for the next day, just like sitting there in shock. I was so surprised about all of the information that had came through for me. And I just was sitting there and journaling and like being in the moment. And I knew that was supposed to be incorporated in what I was doing. And what's really cool about it is it just feels so circle on my journey with how that was the very first spiritual thing I did. And now it's a huge part of what I'm doing with my clients. And I was doing, the Akashic Records for a couple of weeks. And I was like, I really feel like I'm supposed to be doing energy work with this. And I had been doing my own personal energy work for years at that point. And when I did it in the Akashic Records, it was just so much more impactful, because the Akashic Records, when they're open, it just really elevates everything and makes it more expansive. And like, I don't know how else it just amplifies it. That's a good word to use. It amplifies it.
Yeah.
So I just went on a total tangent, but that is really how I got to this place. And it feels so much deeper than what I have previously done in my entrepreneurship journey. And it's so much more heart-centered that I just love it. Every time I leave a session, I'm like, I feel so energized and I'm like, oh my God, I just feel so great because I know that I'm truly making such an impact in my clients' lives and giving them that clarity and the clean slates that they need to expand.
Yeah. And so how would you describe the Akashic Records? Because last night I was in an Akashic Records. It was like a group healing session, and it was a large session, and it was a group read, but so many people had questions of what is the Akashic Records. And so could you kind of give us a description and a little bit of the background of the Akashic Records?
Absolutely. That is definitely really common. A lot of people are like, yeah, I've done a reading, but I have no clue what it is. So no one's alone in that. The Akashic Records is a living energy on the fifth dimension. So it's in the quantum and it is constantly transforming, moving, growing. Basically, what this energy is it houses the information for every soul, their thoughts, their feelings, experiences from not only this life, but past lives and future possibilities. A lot of people like to explain it like a library because it brings it down into the 3D for us. So they like to say, it's like a library and every soul has their own book. So when you're reading, because they call it, you're reading the Akashic Records, it's almost like you're reading the information on that individual soul. But pretty like the energy of the Akashic Records is a very healing energy. So when your records are opened, it automatically gives that individual space to really connect with their highest self, receive clarity. It kind of takes away the very human experiences that we have on a daily basis, like fear and judgment and scarcity. And it just puts us in this place where we're connected to our true self at the core of who we are so that we can temporarily remove that ego from the equation and just know like what that blueprint of our soul looks like.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to describe it. And I've heard people, say it's like the soul's kind of like story of past lives, future, present lives, kind of like wrapped into one, and what it means and the story behind their journey, and just learning, I guess, their message from energy or ancestors or whatnot. So that's really cool. How do you use the Akashic Records? That's my dog. Hold on 1 second. He's like banging super hard. Hold on. Let me just pause it. Okay, so with the Akashic Records and kind of using it like with everyday modalities and intentions and practices, and opening up your questions like for the universe and your questions for seeing kind of like your pathway and what you want to continue to achieve. How do you use this with your clients? Like how do you incorporate the Akashic Records with your clients?
So I love this question because I feel like a lot of people come to me and they kind of they're like, well, I've done Akashic record readings before, but I know that's not what you do. So we'll just see how this goes. But what I do is it's very different than a lot of the people and individuals that I've worked with before. I open the client's Akashic records and then I'll kind of ask them, like, what areas do you want to focus on? Normally, it's something very specific or past traumas that they've experienced and things. And what I'll do is I'll use the Akashic records to gain information and just kind of dive deep very quickly on what that situation looked like, what, a person might come to me and say, like, I have anxiety and that's what I want to work on today. And we'll get to the root of where did this anxiety come from? When did it get started? Is it something is from past lives? Is it something that's handed down generationally? Is it like the karma or from a trauma? And once we get to the root of what that is, I will do energy work to see that in the individual's field, and I will work with them to remove this energy and basically clear it all out so that at the end of our session, I'll say, okay, so I want you to tap into this feeling of anxiety or how you felt before our session. And I want you to tell me what you feel. And they will just kind of sit there and they'll be like, I don't feel anything. It feels like it was a story that I heard, or it's a movie I watched, but it doesn't feel like it's a part of me or my story anymore. And so what we're doing is we're really clearing out the energy. It is a combination of all different techniques that I have channeled and developed and used over years and years, but the Akashic Records amplifies these modalities. And then it just creates this magical vortex, not only allowing me to get answers from the Akashic Records so that we're not spending an hour trying to, talk back and forth and just figure out where they got anxiety from, but it also allows me to shift this energy and untangle their blockages in a more effective, efficient, and just seamless way so that the clients can have their highest level of healing.
Yeah, that's so cool, because I like that it's really just the energy work of, the past or present or possibly even the future. Like, some of us don't even really understand that when we're searching for our energy to be shifted, there's so many like modalities and there's so many questions of how do you do it. But the number one is like seeing it within and seeing what that energy within, if it's like learning about your chakras, if it's learning through the Akashic records, but what that energy that you have within is really saying to your soul and really saying to your mind and your spirit. So that's absolutely amazing that you were able to incorporate it. How how does one get started learning more about the Akashic records? Like, if somebody, because I always get questions about the Akashic records, and and it's same with the chakras. Like, people are so in tuned into the third dimension. Like, we're so in tuned into this dimension, and what can we see, what can we hold, what can we touch, and a lot of us are like, well, how can I learn more, or how can I, a lot of people were asking me, well, how do I see my chakra? It's something that you aren't necessarily going to see, but this is where it's placed, or that energy lives within you right here. So how would one start to learn more about their Akashic records and start to learn more about it?
The very first thing I would say is that working on with your clear senses to figure out what your strongest clear senses are, how you can be developing them further, and working on tapping into that quantum energy. Because really, in order to use the Akashic records and access them, you need to be able to access the quantum, which comes from meditation. It comes from your clear senses. It comes from just being able to learn how to access that energy. And So meditation, figuring out what your clairsenses are, whether that is your clairvoyance or your clairsentience, and just starting to work with them, because as you work with your clairsenses, they're going to start opening more, and they're going to start opening up other ones as well. The second thing I would have to say was working on clearing your energy and just placing protection around yourself. I think that's something that's so important for anyone who is in the spiritual world, because we can be so impacted by other energies, by false light, by just negative things. And especially when you're learning to tap into the quantum, you're going through the 4D. And that contains a lot of lower negative energies. And so you don't want to get too attached by those and be picking them up and then get to a place where you don't know what to do with them. So I always recommend, it can be as simple as just asking your angels to place protection around you before you do that kind of work. Or even I like to, tell people who are beginners for cleaning out their energy to do it in the shower. Like, allow the water to pretend like it's a waterfall. It's just washing everything away and down the drain, and allowing it to just not physically clean you, but also energetically clean you. So that's my second tip. And then my third one would be just to try accessing them. It might take multiple tries. And at the heart of what I've learned with the Akashic Records is the thing that matters the most is your intention. If you have the intention that you want to access the Akashic Records for your highest good, and that you want to, talk to them about something specific, and you're coming from a heart-centered place, you're feeling grounded and connected and just centered, that's when it's going to really open up for you. So those are my 3 biggest tips for anyone who wants to get started.
And for people who are starting to get tapped into their Akashic records, or starting to learn more about it, and trying to find that energy source where they can hear their messages and hear that, you don't do readings for them, or you do more of like a clearing?
So I will do healing, clearings, and readings. It's really focused on what the client needs in that moment. Yesterday I did some sessions and they ended up to be more just healing and reading based. And then, earlier this week I was doing them and it was like very strongly, mostly energy work. So it's really what the client needs. When it comes to tapping into that energy of the Akashic Records and getting the messages, the other thing I just want to say is that they can come through multiple ways. You might hear them as thoughts, you might see images. It comes through in multiple ways, but usually like you're going to get some thoughts and things that it's like you're hearing it in a way, but if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like
the way that I read the Akashic Records, it's very different depending on who I'm reading it for, because usually my strongest clairsense is based on the person's strongest clairsense.
Yes. And I like that you acknowledge that, because I think sometimes when people who are on the other area where they're like starting to learn and they're starting to gravitate towards their spiritual awakening or their spiritual process, or what modalities work for them and how they can kind of step into this area, I think sometimes they think that as healers or intuitives or people who do readings, that we have a sense of like all knowledge for that individual. And in some, like there's been times where I've done readings for people and I have, given specific dates. I've given, like zodiac signs, because I work a lot with astrology, and I've given a lot of like defined pinpoints. And then there's been other times where I've done readings for people where their energy is actually more focused on somebody else. And I'm picking up from that reading of actually a different person that their energy is so focused on. So sometimes as healers, how, like, I know I have like certain strategies where I try to calm the client before I even tap into their energy to make sure their energy is kind of like at a place where it allows you to.
Mhm.
But when you are tapping into other people's energy, how do you console them, or how do you get them to an area where they're able? Because I know with me, the Akashic Record sounds like so much, like so many messages, so much, like I'm like, do I want to know about all my past lives? Do I want to know about all this? Do I want to hear, so how do you get them to that area where they feel safe and you're able to
Well,
tap in?
the very first thing I do before a session is I place protection around me and the client. Once we get started, and as soon as I open the records, honestly, the records does a lot of that for me, which is very lucky for me because it really puts the person at ease and just gives them this sense of calm as soon as the records are open. And it grounds them. It allows them to be in a place where they're more likely to be connected and get their own messages. And they're just like, everything is going to feel more true to them because, again, that ego is going to be a little more quiet. So the records does some of that work for me. If for some reason that client does have a lot of negative energy around them, or they're not very grounded and just their energy is a little chaotic, what I'll have them do is we'll start by taking some deep grounding breaths. I always do call in multiple angels and set up crystal grids and like candles and things before sessions as well. And then what I'll do is I'll just spend 5 minutes or so in the beginning of the session to work on clearing out their energy and combing through their aura and like smoothing out their energy and everything so that they'll at that point feel a lot more calm and just at peace. And they're like, okay, yes, now we can get started. And it helps me too, because when I'm doing the energy work, it's a lot easier to do the energy work if they are in a good place energetically.
Mhm. When do most people usually want to tap into their Akashic records and start to learn more about them? Does it happen gradually, or is it kind of like a sudden thing?
I feel like it's something that it might be coming up for you in your field quite a bit. You might just be hearing about it a little bit and you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. And when you're ready to take that step, you'll know it. I know some people who are like, yeah, I've tried to access my records, but I didn't get anything. And that's okay if that happens. That just means that, like, maybe it wasn't the time or you weren't in a place to be ready to receive that information. And it does take some practice. Like, when I first tried to open the Akashic records, I had already been doing this energy work in my spiritual practices for years and years. So for me, I don't think it was as challenging for some people who have told me their stories. And I had been spending the entire previous year working on communicating specifically with my guides and angels and my clairsenses. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Oh no, that's
Like, what was the question again?
the question was, when do most people usually kind of want to learn about it? Is it usually when they're going through like an event in their life, or is it
I feel like
more?
they just get a pull to it.
Mm,
And it's different for everyone. Some people, they might be in a place where where they feel more lost or stuck or just stagnant, and they really are craving and seeking clarity,
yeah.
or connection. And so that tends to be the most common. But for me, I just work with so many people who are already doing a lot of the personal development. They're doing a lot of trauma work. They already have an idea of what they want to work on and focus on, versus other people who are probably working with individuals who are like more in that energy of like, I want some clarity and I want you to give me some certainty or
Right.
something, some type of validation and something to know that like I can believe in this and that I'm not going crazy and that my intuition is correct. Because a lot of times when you're starting off, it's hard to trust your intuition. It's hard to
Oh
trust
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. That's definitely probably one of the things that I've noticed most is people want to trust their intuition, but so many obstacles have been put their way where they've been almost put in this notion where trusting their intuition is them maybe second guessing
Mhm.
or doing something that isn't necessarily the best for them, or it's too many limiting self beliefs or whatnot. But sometimes your intuition comes in many forms, and you just have to kind of learn which area of it you want to trust, and how you're going to trust it. I mean, if intuitive people didn't work off of their intuition, they wouldn't be able to give readings, because like especially with energy, when we pick up intuitive messages, or when we pick up areas where it's like, there's incidents where I'm like, who's the Libra? I know there's a Libra right now. Who's the Libra? You know what I mean? Like with a client,
Yeah,
or who's,
you're just like, I'm going with
I'm
this.
going with it, either it's, and then they'll tell me this is the person. Yeah, you're 100% right. So when we keep submissing our intuition because we're scared we're going to say the wrong answer, or we're scared we're going to deliver the wrong message, we're not truly guided by our intuition. So that is one of the hardest places for people. And that's what so many people I know, like working with the chakras, everybody wants their throat and their third eye open. Okay. Okay. But when it's open, what you going to do with it?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it? When it's excessive, what are you going to do with it? You're going to have to do something with it. And having a intuitive an intuitive open third eye that has a lot of energy isn't always the right thing for everybody. Some people can take it in and some people can't. And that's the thing that I think, as people who are learning about intuitive practices, who are learning about energy, and they're learning about energy shifting, and what do you do with this energy after you've shifted it, or what do you do with this energy where you've validated that you're safe and your root chakra has a strong foundation, and now you're moving up the ladder? What do you do with it? So I think for a lot of people, it's a learning process that we expect to get to this certain area where everything's clear, everything's, we become masters at our specialty. And one of the ways we're going to get there is really trusting our intuition and not being submissive with those messages, because a lot of the messages are very clear when we get them, but just actually having enough courage to say them and spit them out. And you'd be like surprised once you do, because it's like people don't understand, like once they finally tap in their intuition, they're like, I didn't know I even knew that. Yeah,
Yeah. And
you know that.
so many people just think like, oh, well, I'm not intuitive. And I'm like, okay, well, weren't we just watching that movie yesterday? And like the whole movie, you knew exactly what was going to happen. That's like an example. There's so many examples of times it's like, oh, well, didn't you just call your friend? And you were like, or they called you and you were like, oh, yeah, I was just thinking about you. Like that is part of your intuition. And those are signs that you need to follow. And when we're little, with our society the way it is, we are taught to not follow our intuition. We're so connected when we're younger, and it really goes away, and we have to relearn how to tap into that and how to believe it and trust it and follow it. So it's definitely a large part of the journey. Is I feel like half the battle is just learning how to trust your intuition.
Correct. Yeah, it
And
definitely.
the other thing that's so important, I just want to say for people, is that in my journey, and I know a lot of other journeys, you really expect everything to look and feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually doesn't look and feel that way. So if you can be as detached or as open as possible to how you're going to receive messages or how something's going to happen, then you're going to get a lot farther, a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then when you use the Akashic Records, would you say most people use it for healing versus clarity, or is it more as a clarity center?
So with my clients, it's definitely more healing.
Okay.
Um, but because what I do is so different, I think generally overall, the Akashic Records is mostly used for clarity.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because from what I've gathered from other people who use the Akashic Records and use that as their primary focus in their spiritual journeys with clients or within themselves, that it does seem like it is a lot of clarity guidance, like a lot of clarity guidance. How did you decide to center it but base more for a healing approach?
I really love working with people on more of a long-term basis and people who are truly invested in their healing journey and are like ready to take that deep level of transformation. So I knew that for me, it just wasn't going to be the right fit where like I had a 1 hour reading with a person and then didn't see them again, or like maybe saw them a year or two later. For me, I wanted something that people, and I do one-time sessions like that, but ideally I love working with people who are like ready to go in on a package. They want to commit to their long-term growth. And I just love helping them get from where they are to where they want to be to see the full level of transformation so
Yeah.
that they can have like a long-term healing impact and not just something short-term or like clearing out their energies to give them a clean slate so that then they can go and like muddle it up again or like, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, yeah. And I think for people who are on their healing journey, it's very important to find a modality or a practice that works like best for you.
Mhm.
Um, and personally, I also think it shouldn't be something that feels overwhelming, where you feel like I can't learn this all, or I can't take this all in. It should be an energy that makes you feel like safe. And that's what I like about the Akashic Records. It is an energy source that really makes you feel safe and very stable, in the sense where it's not, a source of a modality where you're trying to learn all this stuff. You have to learn some, but it's not to the point where you're like overwhelmed. That's like, somebody asked me, do I do human design? And I was like, oh God, no. Like, I have no idea what that is. No, I don't. I will find somebody who could talk about it, but I do not. Right. Or
I have a human design person if you need some.
okay, great. So I'm like, yeah, no. But what I try to do is find people modalities that will work for them. I know,
Mhm.
like for me, I personally love astrology. I personally love tarot. I love the chakra system. I
Yeah.
love the simplicity of these modalities. And that's why I use them in my practice. That's why I use them with working with others, because these are the ones that I feel the most confident with. And
Mhm.
I feel the most that I'm able to help and give people proper guidance. And I love that the Akashic Records is such like a beautiful, almost like historical fact of like one soul. It's just a very
Yeah.
beautiful modality. And I like that people are starting to share it more, because I feel that it hasn't been necessarily talked about, or people, like you said, you were nervous coming out about it and kind of starting your business formulated around the Akashic Records, because so many of us are concentrated on, what can I see? How can I see it?
Mhm.
What can I grab? What can I feel? And but really the energy of it and learning to use it with energy work is extremely amazing. So when you establish, like, I'm not going to be fearful of letting people see me, and seeing what I do. How was it when you started to bring it up with like family, friends, and society? Because it is something that isn't, I would say it isn't very mainstream, and I hate using that word mainstream, but
Mhm.
it isn't something very mainstream like I mean, even like tarot is now becoming, very mainstream, where it took me
Yeah,
a
like crystals and
long,
things.
yeah, where it took me like a long time to even have enough courage to be like, I do tarot, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but because, but now it seems like stuff's starting to become more mainstream. Like these modalities are starting to become more um, present where people can find them. But the Akashic Records is still something that has a lot of history, but it's almost like a sacred practice that um, has not
It's like
hit
there's
the
still not a lot
waveforms.
of information shared about it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
still so many people who are like, yeah, I just don't know what it is, but I've heard about it. And it's you're totally right. It is something that's definitely a lot less mainstream in the whole spiritual world. So for me, when I was going through my own personal journey, I was going through a lot of places where I pretty much removed a lot of people from my life. Um, and with my friends, and I feel like they have been extremely accepting. They were like very excited. They have all started kind of on their spiritual journey. So it's been really fun to be able to share with them. Um, my family is, I think, still struggling a little bit to understand it because, like you said, it's not a tangible thing. And that's what's hard for a lot of people. But they have been very open, especially more so with it. I think it's definitely been like a little bit of a curve for both of us. And for me, spirituality has never been something that like I want to try to force on someone. I'm not the person who's going to be like, oh, I tricked my boyfriend into doing this meditation because I wanted to see what he thought about it. And I
Right.
hear people doing that all the time. And I'm like, what?
He manifested me an engagement ring, honey. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I don't I don't want to force this on someone.
Yeah.
Like if they come to me and they want to have a conversation, I am so open about it, but I'm never like, let's sit down and let me tell you about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's definitely been really interesting navigating it with my family. And there's, I think, still some bumps to get over, but we've come very far, especially growing up really Catholic, like Catholic school, prayer multiple
Oh.
times a day, church a couple times a
Oh,
week. So
okay. So you guys were in
yeah,
it. Okay.
it's totally different for me and my family. And as far as society goes, it's like I've really gotten to this place where I don't care.
Yeah.
And part of it took me a while to be able to say, like, I am a healer. And I feel so confident and comfortable saying that now. But 8 months ago, 12 months ago, that was totally not the case. So for me, part of what I needed to do in order to claim that was to go out and tell people this is what I do. And, I would be like in an Uber with someone and they'd ask me what I do. And I would tell them and they'd be like, okay, there's a crazy
Right. They're like,
person in
no,
my
no, no,
car.
we really do. Right.
And a lot of my friends who are in this world, they just tell people, well, I'm a coach or like I'm a business coach or something because like, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I want to be able to claim it. And I want to like, not for anybody else, but for me, I need to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it took a while for me to get to that place, but now that I'm there, it's very freeing.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you brought up the fact with the religion, and I'm baptized Catholic. All my kids are baptized Catholic, and I grew up in a Catholic home, but we were not very We weren't very Catholic, I guess you could say.
You're like a holiday Catholic.
Like we did the holidays, maybe sometimes went to church, and I went to a camp one time, but for the most part, like my mom was like, the best Catholics are good liars. I was like, yeah, right? Like that was kind of like, the house that I lived in. So we, when my family found out, that I was doing astrology and tarot, automatically my dad's like, she's a witch. I knew it, she's a bruja, it's like, yeah. So he always, kind of teases me or whatnot, but it's all good. It definitely takes some time for the families, I think, to understand it. And even when you really step into it as a practice and as a modality that you're using constantly, like as a ritual and as something that's almost like a daily thing, it's really it also brings enlightenment to them, because my son would always kind of make jokes like, oh mom, so and so's mom's like you, and I'm like, what does that mean? She knows about that stuff, astrology, and she knows about that stuff, and she's got crystals around the house. So I notice he picks stuff up, and then he goes, the other day he goes to me, mom, which is really funny stories. He goes, mom, do you know the biggest fish come out right before a full moon? And I'm like, what is he talking about? He's like, do you know fishermen used to fish off of the moon phases? And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And then he's like telling me about how he's now starting to practice his fishing towards the moon phases. And I'm like, this is my child.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, this is my child. So and now I'm finding crystals in his car, which is another thing that's really
you guys can't see me, but I'm like clapping right now.
So keep it up. And I think as a collective of people who are on this pathway of enlightenment and making this area not so sensitive to talk about to others, really, having that open where people, because sometimes when we're looking for our spiritual journey, and if we're trying to find an area, if it's through the Akashic Records, through astrology, through, tarot, through human design, or whatever it is that we're gravitating to, I just really want people to know that that message that you're receiving is meant for you. So continue to, look for it and find more about it, because that's really going to help you get through your path, if it's healing or clarity or intuition or what is ever you're focused on. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And so I love this question I ask sometimes. Tell me, so tell me, girl, you got like your own reality show. Okay. People are watching you every day. Like they're like turning you on. They got you the DVR set. Like what is in a day in a life like, going through your practice and going through your everyday intentions? Let me know a little bit about what you do every day.
Yes. Okay. So I have a spiritual morning routine that I usually stick to. I mean, that's not every day, but I try to. And that includes energy clearing. It includes grounding, protection, journaling, sometimes doing my own Akashic Records. It usually includes like some type of like dance or way to really move my energy and feel into my feminine, because that's something I'm really working on. And I'm trying to remember what else I do in the mornings. I feel like that's pretty much it overall. I have long mornings. Like I have like 3-4 hour mornings. So
oh wow,
I ease into my day.
Yeah, no. Meanwhile, I'm like spilling coffee on myself as I'm like darting out the door.
No, I really ease into it. And part of that, like that's not something I recommend for everybody or my clients even, but because I really try to be as clear of a channel as possible. And it's really important for me with what I do to stay so connected to the quantum. These are things that I have to do on a very regular basis. So once I do that, I will, depending on my day again, like some days I don't have sessions and I'm doing more admin work. Other days I usually do like 2 to 3 sessions a day max, just because they can be a lot when you're doing multiple compacted together. I'll take my dog for a walk. I always try to take her for like a long walk. And I really like to cook. So that is something that I'm always like cooking big meals. Or some days, mornings, I'm like going out for coffee with my friends. And basically, I've really created a career where I can have as much freedom with my schedule as possible. And I love that about it. So I really take advantage of that. Right now it's obviously colder, so I'm not like going outside as much, but I live by the beach. I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I'm at the
Nice.
beach a lot, or like at coffee shops. And at nighttime, again, meditating, energy clearing, and protection.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, like, I've been doing a lot of manifestation rituals and stuff too lately. So that's been really fun to get back into, because I was kind of out of that for a few months.
Yeah.
But that is like a snapshot of like what a normal day would look like for me.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I really like that you've created a day where you're able to have that balance of work and also that time for yourself, and clearing and being an open channel, because that is so important for people who are in this area. And I think that that's something that who's listening, if that's what they're looking for, is coming into this area of being a resource for others, make sure you have that area to be a resource for yourself. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I mean, I even do sessions with other healers and people who
Mm-hmm.
work on my energy, because as someone who works in this field, you can clear your energy, but you might miss things that others will get for you. And it's like how a hairstylist has to go get a massage.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that it's like part of the trade, the protection, the energy clearing. It's so, so important. And I've been seeing that a lot in my sessions coming up, because so many people aren't doing that, and they just are like jumping into spirituality without without doing it, and then they're picking up negative things, and that's something we can avoid. So
Yeah,
let's try to avoid it.
definitely. Yes, yes. There is a lot of, I was just reading something the other day that I was like, oh gosh, like the spiritual world is so big. It's so just massive. And when we're taking in this space and we're learning more about this space, just take the conscious note that it's just because it's the spiritual world doesn't mean that it's any better than the real world. Like there's still
Yeah.
areas, there's still guides, there's still intuitive people or practitioners that won't necessarily lead you to the right path, or a path that you even really need.
Yeah.
Not all of us need extensive healing. Some of us might, and some of us don't, so, and not all of us have so many messages that need to be received. So just be very mindful where you place your, I guess you could say, place your presence with others when you are learning. Be mindful, and especially, now that I got like the two people who have like imposter accounts of me, I'm like, what?
Oh,
Fuck. Like, I'm like, oh, what the fuck?
yeah.
Like, seriously, like, I will never message you to say, do you want to get a reading? Like, that's not me. So be mindful, people. Yeah. Um, so definitely thank you so much. Let me know, how can the listeners and how can everybody find you?
Yes. So you guys can find me on Instagram. Mari Lee B. It's MariLeigHB. I like to spell it out because my name's a little tricky. And you guys can also find me on my website, which is marilee.com.
Well, thank you so much. And always, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this podcast with all your friends. And I will be posting the show notes, all the information so you can find Marty in the show notes everywhere so you could get in contact with her. And thank you so much for being on Chakras and Cuss Words.
Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun.
Bye, everybody.